Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to Forgive and Forget. My name is Hal Sadi, a.k.a. Khalu. And this week on the podcast, we have a guest. His name is Robert Tabet. Robert is a fantastic comedian. He's a writer. He was a music producer at some point. I believe he still does that as well. He does a million things. He's like a machine. So, and if you can follow him on Instagram at It's Tabet, ITSTABET. And let's get on with the show.
I do music stuff with my buddy and I help him write, because I like to write, but a lot of times I'll just like grab a mic and I'll talk into it, and that like helps the words come to my brain. I don't know why. This is like a comfort thing. It's always been a comfort thing, but I don't know. I think it's just we just get used, like, especially if you write on stage, there's something about it's like a placebo effect where this like triggers your brain.
Yeah.
The creativity just comes, but yeah.
Yeah, dude.
I don't know.
Do you write on stage sometimes?
It depends on the joke. Like, I don't know. So I like to clean it up on stage. Like, sometimes it'll just get to a point where it's too much written out, and I'm like, I need to figure out how I'd actually say this. So then I kind of write on stage. But sometimes there's a thing that I don't even know what it is, and then I'll say it on stage. But if there's like a bit that I kind of know in my head, I don't like to write on stage. But I also do know that my writing process has changed a lot in just like a year and a half. So it's like, I don't fucking know. Maybe I'll start writing on stage. All my friends write on stage, so I'm like, maybe I'll just get there.
I think it could be part of the process, at least. I don't know.
For sure. There's a mic that I've been hitting on Sundays that not a lot of people go to. But it's that mic at Dig Pub with my buddy Corey, and he gives me like 15, sometimes like 20 minutes.
Oh wow, okay.
And then, so part of me thinks if there's a point in life where I'm just getting to work regularly in front of crowds, I can maybe write on stage, because then what I'll find is after about 5 to 7 minutes, you kind of find that pocket.
Yeah.
If the crowd's with you, and then you kind of feel that adrenaline, your creative juices going, and then I can kind of wander off and write on stage. So a lot of it, I feel like a lot of times it's not an environment or a situation that's conducive to me even figuring out if I can write on stage.
Yeah.
But there's been glimpses of longer mic sets where I'm like, oh, I have 20, I can kind of write on stage, and I can talk to people and they can talk back, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of like, this is a new thing that I don't get to do very often. So I'd say in my current situation, I don't write on stage, but I've had glimpses where I'm like, maybe I can do this, maybe it's just not the right situation for it.
Yeah. I've had moments where I do it, and it's a lot of bombing, at least in my case. I don't know, but I bomb a lot anyway.
Right. And I think bombing is interesting too, because it's like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people just throw a big umbrella on the word bombing, where like you say something and like there's no laughs, but chances are, like, let's say you're getting no laughs, but it's building up to something, and then you find the thing that gets the big laugh at the end. If you never reach that point, maybe you bombed, but if you've eventually reached that point where it all ties together, you weren't bombing, you were just kind of figuring something out. And a lot of times too, people will be like, I just bombed at a mic where everybody's bombing. I think personally, if everyone's bombing, no one's bombing.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
environment. I think a bomb is like you feel it and you're like, oh.
Yeah, like just the sweat
yes,
beating down on all.
Everyone's doing good, and then you bombed, and then you're like, fuck, that's a real bomb. But I feel like talking on, I have friends that can just write on stage no matter what. I don't think I'm one of those, mostly because I like writing. I like writing a lot. I think like writing on stage a lot of times is almost like a defense mechanism for some people, because they don't like to do it off stage, which is fine too. Comedy is all about leaning into your strengths. I think. I think it's more important to triple down on your strengths. And make sure your weaknesses aren't something that's going to sink the boat. Just make sure they're not like detrimental.
I can definitely I agree with that, because sometimes like I feel like when I write that works for me, but then I get too stuck in I wrote it that way, so I have to say it that way. I don't know if that happens to you.
Yes.
And but then I go on stage, I'm like, fuck this, I'm just gonna talk about whatever, and that's fun too. So in my case at least, I feel like if there's like some middle ground, I'll tell you something I started doing like yesterday.
Cool.
I started walking around and then dictating into my phone, just talking into
Right.
it. And I feel like I've found a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have found before just writing.
Yes.
So, and I just keep asking myself, like, oh, what's funny about this? What else is funny about this? And it just prompts me to keep digging in, which I don't think I would have ever done that before.
Right. I used to. So my first year, and I'm coming up on the end of my second. Right. And I the first year I had a stage in my house that I built. It was just it was like a 5x5 piece of thin plywood that I put on cement blocks, and I wrapped it with a rug. And it would be in this empty room that I now have for sketches. But before, I would just, when I'd have an idea, or sometimes after mics, I'd go home and then I'd just get on that and I would just pace around with a mic. And it would just like help me figure out like the next part of the bit, or even if it even feels good, because what I realized, because I write a bunch of different styles, right? I'm working on a movie with my buddy Alex.
Yeah.
And then I write sketches, and then I write comedy, and then I write music with my buddy.
Yeah.
It's
oh, you still do music?
I do. I help my buddy write music. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A lot of it is obviously it's all from the same place, but you have to kind of think about your audience and how they're going to digest it. Like what I found a lot of times is what I write funny is witty, but then when it comes out, it's like, well, I see the joke, but it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't elicit
it's not
to laugh.
funny. Yeah.
Yes. It's more like, oh, that's witty. And then a lot of times just talking through something is when you make yourself laugh. And then you're like, oh, that's the humor in it. But yeah, I also think it is important, like just like you're walking around and talking, that's bringing an extra edge to your process. I think it's also important to just write whatever, because a lot of times I was talking to a comedian that I really like. His name's Matt the W, and he does, he's really cool.
He's really funny, man.
He's really funny. He's really cool. He's unique. And what I think the reason why I think he's so unique is because he's always done music, rapping, and comedy. And this is just something I observed when I first started doing comedy, and what I like clung to and what I still cling to is none of my favorite comedians only do comedy.
Okay.
They all do something else too. And I think it's because it's like, in order to become a good writer, or just be able to become good at just writing bits and just being a good comedian, you have to work your brain in like parallel ways,
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're going to the gym. I always use this metaphor. It's like when you're going to the gym and you're benching. At a certain point, if your triceps don't get stronger, you're going to plateau at your bench. So you have to work your triceps. You have to work some back muscles too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when people say, I don't like writing, I think a lot of it is you don't like writing because you have pressure on yourself to write something funny, when in reality, like guys like Matt the W get it. You just need to be writing.
Yeah.
So the comedy will come in waves, but you a lot of times to break through to the next level of comedy writing, you have to get your writing to the next level in of itself, and that's never going to come if you don't just write. And a lot of people like talk to me about writing, and I'm like, just start writing about why you don't like writing.
Yeah.
You're very quickly going to find stuff about yourself, and you're going to find that you kind of do like writing. Just take the pressure off of yourself for it to be funny. That's all it needs to be, is just writing. And I think that's, I don't know.
You mentioned that all of your favorite comedians are like, they all do something else. Could you?
So like for me, the ones are like, Louis did everything. Louis my number one.
Yeah, agreed.
He's my absolute favorite. I think he's never missed on a special. Maybe 2019 on Netflix a little bit. But what's funny is then he got canceled shortly after, and then he came back with 3 of his best.
Like the best ever.
Yeah, like he kind of is like my Michael Jordan, because he went through some weird shit in the middle, and then he came back with the 3-peat. So it's like, that's Louis. That's one. Seinfeld, you got him right there.
Yeah.
He obviously, even like his Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, I fucking love that show.
Amazing.
Oh, I used to call it a guilty pleasure. Now it's like, it's just the shit. I love it.
It's so much fun to watch, and very introspective too.
And it's like, oh, these guys are just like human beings, and they've just been doing it for a while. Bill Burr has done a million things.
Yeah.
F is for Families one. He just directed that movie that I'm afraid to watch because I heard.
It's good.
Okay, I got some weird feedback on it, but maybe I'll watch it.
Just go with low expectations. You'll have a good time.
Chappelle, another one. The Chappelle Show, amazing. And then Dave Attell did it. Even he did did Insomniac.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like those are like my 5 favorites, you know, and I think it's, you know, even like Patrice, I love Patrice. He would do Opie and Anthony, and like he would be talking on the, you know, on the fucking radio for hours. So it's like they were always working on something adjacent to comedy. I think a lot of times, you know, I've had people like, I talk to people that like quit their jobs and just do comedy, and they like lose their mind because it's such a lonely thing. And you will be just in a hole of despair and loneliness because you're not working out other parts of your life. You have to be a human being. I think that's the important part.
I agree with all of what you just said. Like my favorites, most of them. I love David Tell. I don't consider him one of my favorites, but I do love him. I went to see him live, and I was like, dude, what the fuck is this guy doing?
I'll tell you David Tell's story after. Keep going.
Even in sports, like if you like all the greats, like for example, Michael Jordan was a baseball player. Tom Brady was a baseball player. The other guys was something else. Like Wayne Gretzky, he used to like play a bunch of different sports, and he just played hockey because his dad just encouraged him to do whatever, and he always gravitated. They all had something else that they liked to do. So that like what you were saying, like it just like works that other muscles.
Yeah, even Rogan, who's like one of the modern like favorites, he did, you know, think of like the comic Shane Gillis. Sketch. He has the sketches, he has his podcast, and he has his, you know, his stand up, and it's not a coincidence. I truly believe a lot of times when people feel like they're stuck or they're in a rut with comedy, it's because they're searching for the answers in comedy, when in reality you need to search for the answers in your personal life and grow as a person and grow creatively and then come back to comedy. And I think that's why it's so important also to be organized in comedy, because a lot of times what I found, like I try to stay like hyper organized. What I found is a lot of times I'll come up with a bit that's not quite funny yet because my voice hasn't found what it needs to be yet, and my timing and my cadence are off. And then so I'll just I'll file it in a specific spot, and then I'll come back to it in just like 2-3 months, and it's already, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the timing of that. Like that's where I have to slow down. That's where I have to pause. A lot of times, like my anxiety would have gotten, you know, to the point where I don't want to pause and let it like settle into the audience. And then I come back around, I'm like, no, I got to let them eat this for like a few seconds. And then it comes back to it. So, yeah, I think it's you know, just being organized and coming back to certain stuff to a point where you can just allow yourself to grow and find the comedy. It's like that's everything. But the David Tell story is going to tell you. When he went to Cap City, I went to all 7 of his shows.
Oh, wow. You went to all 7?
Yeah. And that blew my mind, because that kind of put into perspective how you can work at comedy, because there was maybe like 20 minutes of overlap between each set, and the rest where he would just like wander. And I'm like, that's fucking crazy. Yeah. It's really weird. And a lot of times when he'd bring people on, like he always brings people on stage after, it's very calculated what they'll talk about. It's almost like they're helping each other riff through bits that they're working on.
Oh, okay.
So, and that it was really interesting too, because that last show, what happened is, so he'd done 6 shows, really amazing. 7th show, it started off weird because about 3 minutes into his set, his mic cut, and then he had another mic on stage, and that's because, you know, he invites people on stage after, so he had 2 mics, and he was like kind of goofing around, and it was like an improv thing, but it wasn't his act, and the energy was like waning. So when they finally fixed that mic that he was working on, and it turned on and the audience like clapped a little bit, he just turned it up, and he literally did the best version of every joke from the last 6 nights.
Wow.
Like murder. Like, and I watched the switch go, and he just did, this is the best version of the joke, this is the best version. Like, he just went, and it was like, it just slaughtered. And I was like, oh, okay, there's just different levels to like, where it was so good, I couldn't laugh. It's like that South Park episode where Cartman sees the people whose faces have literally turned into assholes. And it's so funny. He can't laugh. That's why I was just like, oh my God, no one in here knows what he just did. But I get it. Like literally, because it was weird. It was like the first 10 minutes of the set, maybe like 8 minutes, maybe not the first full 10, but the first 8 minutes of the set were getting wasted because it was like the mics weren't working. He was improvising, trying to be funny with the crowd, walking around. I think at one point he killed a cockroach that crawled across the stage, but it wasn't his act, and you could feel it. Like his brain was like, and then when the mic worked and everybody started clapping, he just went into it, and it was like he was stepping on laughs with bigger laughs to a point where it was like just pure murder. And I was like, oh shit, he's one of the great ones. It was
Dude,
crazy to watch. Yeah.
That's why people always say the tell is like their favorite and whatever.
Yeah.
And just you witnessing that, you've just got a master class in everything.
Yeah, it was crazy too because I went after the last show. It was everything was you know, basically winding down, and I waited in line till the end. And so I went up to him. I'm basically the last person in line on the last show, and I had all 7 tickets. I go, and what I noticed during his shows is he would give out a poster. Did you see him at Cap City or Mothership?
I saw him at Cap City.
So he would give out a poster, right?
Yeah.
And people, I noticed this. People would go to shake his hand and they'd give him a fuss bump. He wouldn't touch him every time. When I went up to him after the last show and I said, "Hey man, I'm a comedian. I went to all 7 of your shows." And he looks at me and goes, "Oh shit, you went to all 7 shows?" I go, "Yeah." And then he shook my hand. And I was like, "Oh, this is dope. He hasn't really shaken anyone's hand." And then he goes, "I'm sorry I didn't switch it up that much." And I was like, dude, what the fuck is going on, dude? What do you like? I was just like, I told him, I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you know, I'm working on a couple hours and I feel like I stuck to just one. And in my head, I was like, no, you just like, there's so many bits that he just randomly did once that he never did again. And I was like, what is happening? Like he did one bit where, I think it was like Friday night. He talked about how he went to a petting zoo on mushrooms and he let baby goats eat carrots out of his ears. And I remember I just laughed so hard at that, and he never said it again. And I would just like think back, like there's like probably 200 people that went home that night being like, oh, there's a bit in his new hour about how he did. But then like he never brought it up. So I'm like, was that just something that popped in his head? Is that something he's working on? Is that an old bit? Like, what is that? Did it actually happen? Like, but yeah, it just blew my mind. He was like, yeah, sorry for not working, you know, switching it up more. And I was like, oh, there's so many levels to this. There's so much to like work at. But that's just David Tell. He's just he's just a jokesmith. Because,
dude, that's what I thought. Like, I left his hour. I'm like, okay, I know he changes tags here and there. So he must have like changed that, like maybe 20% of his set. But everything else is just going to be that. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, and what's great, like the way I would describe it is, let's say there's 20 things he wants to talk about. Like I remember at one point he talked about like what's it called when you're like on the beach and you're like with the metal thing, detecting. Yeah. He had a part about metal detecting, right? Let's say he talked about metal detecting, I don't know, telescopes, blah, blah, blah. He has like 20 things he wants to talk about. He'll take 10 of them and do them for like 2 minutes, and then he'll take 10 of them and do them for like 8 to 9 minutes.
Okay.
And he'll just really stretch it out and really do new tags and like really take the bit to a weird place. And then that last night, he took all 20 bits and did the best 3 of all of them. So each night he was like rearranging the order he talked in, which ones he was going to push, which ones he was just going to touch on with like the best tag. Or sometimes I think he would just throw in a weird tag and just be like, let me see if I can recover from this. Like it was all just a game.
Okay.
And I heard Nick Mullen kind of did that too. And he's one of my personal like current favorites, even though he only
really
has
good.
he's
you
awesome.
Seen his special?
It's so good. Year of the Dragon. I've watched it, but I watched it when he came to Cap City. I was talking to a guy that works at Cap City, a comedian, and he said he saw the act every night, and he said it was the same bits but rearranged and certain ones stretched to a certain point. It was almost like calculus. So for me, it's like it seems like that's just how the best ones work.
Yeah.
And like for me, this is what I always tell comedians, that like it's so easy to compare yourself, but I don't like to compare outcomes. I like to have effort-based goals.
Yeah.
Like I don't really give a shit about who's getting booked and where or like how much time on stage I'm getting every month on shows. It's like it's an effort-based thing. Just put in the effort because you want to get to a point where you can work a specific way. That's the point. You want to have certain shit in your repertoire, and
that's the stuff you can control, right?
1,000%. When I hear Nick Mullen's working a certain way and David Tell's working a certain way, and I admire and look up to both of them in comedy, I'm like, that's the goal. The goal is not to get booked on I love getting booked, and I'm grateful for it, but that's not what you can control. A lot of that is politics. A lot of that is kind of like you getting in your own way in a way, you know. So it's like I just want to control the type of effort I can put in. I don't really give a shit about, you know, that stuff. I just want to work a certain way. So those are like the goals that are worth aspiring towards.
Actually, like that organization thing, like I learned that from you.
Right.
The way you work with the OneNote, I'm like, oh shit, like this guy has this whole system.
Right.
And I know I've got like stuff that I've worked on, and I just like leave it there and I don't even touch it. I'm like, oh, I already did it. I don't know. But I never think of like, oh, maybe if I just come back to it at some point, it might get better or anything like that. And then you have that, and from seeing you go around the mics now, I'm like, oh, you're always talking about something different.
Right.
Like, I'm trying to talk about the same thing for like a week, and then if something's working, I'll take that and I'll be like, okay, that's good. I'll use that for later.
Right.
But if I don't get any response, I won't throw it away. But I'll try to be like, okay, I'm not gonna come to this for a while.
Exactly.
But the way you do it, that's very impressive. The way you organize yourself and have that in that way, I really appreciate it when you told me about that stuff. 'Cause I was like, oh, that's
dude.
that's really good.
And also, it's for it's for me also. It's like A, it's how I work. B, it's like it's for my mental health because I have this anxiety about me where I like to constantly feel like I don't have anything to talk about or I don't have anything new.
Yeah.
Or I'll go through a cold stretch and I'm like, I don't know how to do comedy. When you have the bits that work in front of you, you're like, oh, no, I do know how to do comedy. I just haven't done these in a while because I haven't had shows. And then a lot of times, if you haven't written anything new, it's so nice to just be like, well, what do I have? And then you click, you're like, oh, shit, yeah, I have like 9 bits I haven't touched in like a month and a half that I could like revisit. And then there's that hope that you'll figure out one on stage.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there we go. I didn't have to write anything new. Like I'm always trying to write and I'm always trying to cycle stuff and keep them organized. But yeah, there's stretches where I'm like, God, I don't know how to do comedy. And then you open that tab that has all the bits that work and you're like, oh no, I'm good. You know, like I'm fine. Like this is good. And then you're like, oh, I haven't written anything new. And you'll click that tab. I have a floating tab and I have a development tab.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, it's like try. So it's like the tabs that I use, it's try. This is when I have a brand new idea. So I'll put it in try. And then it's try floating when I've tried it and nothing really happened.
Yeah.
And I tried for a week and like nothing really happened. I'll put it in floating. It's just a floating thing because I don't really even know what it is yet.
Yeah.
Is it a punchline? Is it a premise? Is it just a set? Sometimes it's just a set of words that I find interesting. And then from there, I have development and I have cleanup and then I have works. In development, I'm like, oh, these are kind of on a roll. I'm starting to see like where they can get. Cleanup is like where they're close, and then if they work, they just fucking work. Yeah. And when I have nothing, I feel like, oh, I've got, I don't know how to do comedy. I'll click that works tab, and I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. I have jokes. I just forgot about them. And then when I'm like, I haven't written something this week, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'll click that floating tab or the development tab or even the try tab where just stuff that I've been trying a week or two. I'm like, oh, yeah, I could just do this with this. Yeah, let's see. And a lot of times things just reveal themselves where I'm like, oh, this is kind of like this thing that I talked about 3 weeks ago that I thought was just floating. Let's see how they go together. And then also a trick that I like to tell people is just like pick something. I also have like a tab that's stories that I'm going to tell one day. Yeah. And just stuff that's happened throughout my life. And a lot of times it's like, if you can't come up with, if you haven't written something in a while, pick a story and just write it. Yeah. Because a lot of times, a story will cleanse your emotions. A lot of times what happens is when you're going on a cold streak, which happens to everyone with comedy, you almost forget how emotions are supposed to relate to what you're saying. Yeah. You're like, oh, this is like I'm supposed to feel weird about this. Yeah. So a story is like a reset for your emotions because then you're just being honest. You're like, oh, this was scary, this was happy, this was sad, and it's coming out of you in that way. And it's almost like when you're eating sushi, the flour, the lemony shit. Yeah. And it's a palate cleanser. You're like, oh yeah, that's what that's supposed to feel like. And then when you come off the story, you're kind of like reset your emotions. You're like, oh yeah, that's what it feels like to talk about something sad or happy. Even if you don't get laughs, it like resets your emotions.
That's a nice way to look at it. And stories, you don't have to memorize it because you already know what happened, right? Right. You can organize shit later, but you can just get up on stage and talk about it. Right. And you don't have to be like, oh, do I have to remember this? Which is something like my first year in Austin, I was just trying to remember shit. Yep. And I was like, I'm not even present on stage, and what's the point of even getting up, right? So
it's also really hard to bomb a story. Like this is what I tell. Like when I have stories written, they're just bullet points. I like to write a lot. The stories are just bullet points because I'm like, let me just figure this out on stage because at least you're honestly kind of combing your brain. Yeah, a story will reset everything that you're struggling with. you're probably not going to get much laughs, but it's something that's special to you.
Yeah.
You're going to hold people's attention. Even if you don't get many laughs, you're going to figure out how to tell the story. And if you get a laugh, you might have just figured out a part of a new bit. Because you're like, oh, then I can just kind of reference this part in a little bit.
Yeah.
Like a story is great, but chances are you can just take a part of the story
Yeah.
and be like, oh, this is a comedy bit now.
Yeah.
I tell people write a story or tell a story on stage. Or if you can't figure out what to write and you're trying to get back in the swing of things of how to write a bit about your favorite book, your favorite movie, your favorite show, because it'll at least be relatable to some people that have seen it.
Yeah.
And it's similar to a story where you don't have to really make something up. You just have to kind of talk about it, and then you just have to find the humor in what you thought was weird about it.
Yeah. And you can even make a great bit out of it. I'm thinking of like the Louis bit about the Matt Damon movie, the
fucking Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah, dude, that bit is amazing.
It's amazing, and that movie is not current at all.
Like a 20-year-old movie.
Yes, and it's so funny too because it's juxtaposed with a bit about YouTube ads. So it's like that's hyper modern. Like YouTube ads, like you couldn't talk about that 5 years ago. YouTube ads, and then he goes to a movie in the 90s, and it's like, that's exactly what it is you talk about something you really, really enjoy and something you enjoy consuming, because no one can find something that they hate about something more than the person that loves it.
Yeah.
Like any ex-friend or ex-girlfriend or ex-boss you used to work for, you can, if they weren't the boss that you hated right off the bat. They were you used to have a good relationship with them, and then it got to a point where you hate it, right? It's the same thing with a movie or a book that you love. You have that special relationship with it, but you can find something you fucking hate about that thing, because
that is so true.
There's that quote. It's like the opposite of love is not hate; it's indifference.
Yeah.
Love and hate are like very close,
very closely knit.
Very. So it's like, oh, I love this thing, but what do I fucking hate about it? And you'll find the humor in that. People love when you hate something.
Yeah. Dude, that is incredible. Like, well, how for your have you always been this organized?
No, but the thing is, and this is what I was thinking about. Like, I used to think that I hated organization and I hated writing and I hated reading, but it's because I was forced to do it in environments and things that I did not like.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, it's a parallel thing to comedy, where you get good at things that you think you don't like until you can then apply it in things that you do enjoy.
Yeah.
So like, I never thought I enjoyed writing till I started doing it with music and then sketches and now comedy.
No.
I didn't think I enjoyed reading until I was allowed to read whatever I want. Or just started ignoring what I was told to read in school to read whatever I want, right? I didn't enjoy being organized until I had something worth being organized for. But I worked at a law firm right out of college, so like I was constantly forced to be organized, and I'm still working the corporate world, and organization is a big part of that success. So it's like I'm forced to do it in a place that I don't like, and now when I apply it to myself, it is an edge.
Yeah.
It's like the reps that I had to put towards things that I hated, now I apply it to myself. I'm like, this makes sense.
And it makes it a lot easier, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, I feel bad. Like, organization's almost like a language or like an instrument where I'm like, God, you really, I can tell you how to do it, but you're gonna struggle if you haven't done it early and often, And like, that's something that I've learned about the corporate world. Is once upon a time, even when I first started comedy, I thought the corporate world was a detriment. And now I'm like, I see how much work it takes to be successful. Yeah. And I see the elements that you need in every corporate job to be successful, and I think those elements are paralleled to comedy in a weird way. Yeah. And also, I'm constantly surrounded by like normal people, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what you find funny. Yeah. I shouldn't be talking about Jeffrey Epstein if you're laughing about how the cookies are a little burnt today. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's what you laugh at. Okay, that's good. I need that dose of like reality, like the corporate world is like, I actually kind of like it in an interesting way. I've come to find what I love about it. Yeah.
Corporate stuff is, I haven't been in corporate in the corporate world for a long time until like the last year and a half. And it wasn't that corporate until like maybe like the last 4 or 5 months. And I'm like, oh, this is what that feels like. 'Cause I worked for myself for a long time, and I needed to get a job, and I tried to get jobs here and there, but when you work for yourself, then suddenly just having a boss that's just like breathing down your neck is very annoying. So you're like, I can't do this. And then the job I have now is like, for a long time, I didn't have a boss who was breathing down my neck. So it kind of felt like I was working for myself in a way.
Right.
And then I see how they want to make the company corporate now. So like you start to see like, oh, this, and I understand the reason behind being so organized, because that's how you can measure shit. And when you measure stuff, it's a lot easier to say, oh, we can improve this or we can improve that.
Right.
And those numbers tell a story, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
If you apply that to your own stuff, then you can like grow leaps and bounds.
1,000%. I think the hard part about comedy is there's almost no objective measurements of progress, and the ones that do pop up are quickly forgotten.
Yeah.
Like I think this is normal for a lot of people that get booked unless you reach a point where you're like past mics, which I feel like there's way too many people in Austin that think they're past mics when in reality they only do shows. But for shows come in waves, right?
Yeah.
So it's like after you get booked, you're like in this dry spot and you're like, how can I tell if I'm like progressing? It's the organization.
Yeah.
That's the big part of it, because then you can having your shit together off stage where you can kind of have your processes in place.
Yeah.
Like I pay attention to that more than anything, because like, I work on the sketch show with like Hunter, mostly like side by side with Hunter, but Will Malden's also another guy that I work with a lot. And it's like having those processes in place with comedy while also working on the movie, like you can only juggle all that if your processes are completely in place. And I think a lot of people they don't really think about what they're going to do until they show up to a mic and they're like, okay, what am I going to talk about today? When in reality, you got to kind of have to have a sustainable thing in place, or you're going to fucking burn out. It doesn't make any sense to be kind of flying by the seat of your pants. Because a lot of people, I think, try to reach for that next level before they're strong enough to hold on. And they think the strength comes from their jokes. But in reality, the strength comes from being able to keep working once you've reached that next level.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, a lot of people, they reach that next level and they get complacent. Like, I can't tell you how many people had a good Kill Tony appearance and then I haven't seen him. I haven't seen him again. Like, in their head, they're like, I did it. It's like, fuck, dude, no, you could have been great.
Yeah, that was their goal. So once they got that, it's like, oh, I don't need to.
Or they don't even realize that was their goal. Their goal was to feel something. That's the saddest part, is like you see people get into comedy. It's not, I shouldn't say it's sad. I guess the sad part is that they never really realized that. But like, I see a lot of people get into comedy for like weird reasons, and then they kind of fill whatever void they're looking for, and they disappear. So it's like, maybe, that one appearance is all you wanted, but in reality, the key is to reach for that next rung when you're ready, and you hold on, and then you stick.
Yeah.
And then you work there, and then you reach for the next one, and you stick. And that's what I think about. I don't really care about the other shit.
But there is something sad about them having this incredible amount of potential, and then they just got to the first rung, and then they stopped. And just being like, hey, man, you could have been incredible.
Yes.
There is something sad about that.
1,000. It is sad, but it's sad to us.
Yeah, not to them. If they're happy,
they don't. I don't even.
care.
I used to say that all the time. It's like, this is sad, but then I'm like, are they sad? If they're not sad and it's their situation, how sad is it? It's really about as sad as I decide that it is. And then after that, it's like, I guess it moves on. But that's something I had to. Really, I was talking to Melissa Diaz early when I was first starting at Buzzmill. Yeah. And she mentioned something. She was like, people get into comedy for different reasons and people have different goals. And I was like, oh. Like, I don't know why I thought that wasn't the case. Like, that's the way it is everywhere. When you go to the gym, you get everything from the people that are there from the first time to the people that are on more steroids than I can afford on a monthly basis. Yeah. Everyone's got different goals. When you're in work, when you're at a corporate job, you have the people that are just trying to skate by and the people that are trying to be the next CEO and everything in between. When you're grocery shopping, you have some people that are just walking in to get a Kit Kat, and you have some people that need to feed their fucking family. There's different goals in every environment, and I don't know why in comedy I just thought everyone was just trying to be the next Louis, and I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, what are you doing, dude? They're just some people are just bored. Some people just went through a breakup. Some people are really trying. It's just different goals.
A lot of people use it for therapy, which I find hilarious, because like there is no growth in that point.
I find it hilarious, but it's not funny. Yeah. Like I find it hilarious, but it is fucking, because a lot, and this is, it's tough. Like I feel like a lot of people I don't want to say this is a woman thing. I'll say I've just noticed it with women lately.
Yeah.
It's like the ex-divorcees are like, my ex-husband. It's like, that's cool. You just did 20 on your ex-husband. It's not it's not really that, that funny. But I will say, I think the reason that a lot of guys don't do it is because I feel like we don't have like the emotional processing power to be like, like if a guy's trying to talk about his ex, he's like, yeah, she was a bitch, and then like that's it. Where it's like women have like really understood their ex-husband and their own motivation, so they have a lot to talk about. But both sides, it's like, it's not that funny. I think people like hearing about current relationships than exes, because relating to pain is like kind of fun, but then if you're asking the audience to delve into their pain, then it's like, it's a little weird. It gets like tricky. But yeah, that's the therapy, the using it for therapy is odd. For sure is odd.
Yeah. When did you first start like getting into music?
So that was 2013, 2014. So it was me and still my best friend to this day that's not in comedy. His name's Victor. He was like, I just want to start making beats. And so we would like leave the bar. I'd be over at his place till like 2 a.m. He like by chance lived like 2 blocks away from me in college, but I've known him since middle school. And he would make beats and we'd like make beats together, or like I would like write to the beats just to see how they would sound with like vocals on top of the beats. So that we did that. And then after college, I started a record label with him, and I did that while working at a law firm for like, I don't know, up until COVID, so probably like 2016 through 2019. And that was really fun. But around the time that COVID ended, I started to feel like it maybe wasn't what I wanted to do with my life completely, because I started doing sketches at the same time.
Yeah.
And that was really fun too, because I've always been super, like before I did music, I did short films. So like it was just like a circle where it was like, maybe that's what I wanted to do.
So you've always been really creative.
Yeah. And that's just a way of saying I've always not had friends, because like that's like you either develop your social skills or you develop your creative side, or you develop nothing and you wake up with like a general sense of sadness. But like, I was always very creative and into music a lot, and it was like kind of like what I like to spend my time doing along with film. So it was like, I did music starting around 2013, 2014, but I was also like in band when I was in like 6th grade.
What instrument did you play?
So I was in Vermont. It was a very small band, so I would play 2 types of saxophones and 2 types of clarinets.
Jesus.
Yeah, but it's all honestly like so like let's say I'm on a date with you and I'm trying to get laid, I would just leave it at that. But we're on a podcast, so let me just add the stipulation. It was all the same.
Okay.
It was the same fingering, and it was the same reading the notes, and it was identical.
Okay.
So like I'm like, I do 4 instruments. Everyone's like, wow, and I'm like, it's the same thing. Anybody that does one can pretty much do all 4. It was very similar, but it was all about like what that specific piece needed, because our our normal band is like X amount of members, right? And the Vermont elementary school band didn't have that many people, so we're like, okay, for this one you should play this instrument. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I just do that. But I've always been creative and just kind of in my own world, and it works out with comedy, because I think comedy is like poison to like chase people. It's so easy, but I think it's the goal is to like, the way I think about it is like everyone wants to be friends with Joe Rogan. That's cool. He's very cool. And I would love to, but I'm more interested in being the next one. I think you should aspire to be someone that's strong enough that people
just want to gravitate
chase.
towards you.
You don't want to chase. The chasing is death. There's nothing.
Yeah.
No one I admire was like, I did it by being on the back of this guy. It's like, no, you did it by being you and strong enough for people to like look up to. And again, this goes back to the different goals. I don't think there's anything wrong with being that type of person. It just doesn't appeal to me, And some certain people. This is sad. Certain people are only capable of being that thing. But I think if you're capable of being your own person, you're strong, you're mature, you're creative, you have the work ethic, you owe it to the people around you to be that person. So that's just what I aspire to do.
I agree with that. That's what I try to do with myself. But sometimes life just gets in the way, but that's always the goal. I don't know if you have this, but I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then my main goal is just I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want, and eventually someone else's idea just gets in the way, and they're like, oh, we're gonna do that.
Yep.
And it's just like, fuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way is this pause or is it still recording?
No, it's still recording.
Okay,
It's just
cool.
at a certain point.
It passes past
exactly.
the thing.
It's just so
Oh,
long.
speak of the fucking devil, just start moving again. Okay,
Yeah.
I just got distracted.
Let me
but
while you mention that, let
Yeah,
me make
let's
sure
check.
it's still recording. Okay.
we're good to go. and we're back. We could
Yeah.
just do a commercial with the
Yeah.
dog sleeping at that point. No, yeah, I think like the way I think for me the organization is so key because you have organization and discipline are like the keys. I
Mhm.
think because
Yeah.
a lot of times what you're talking about, I have to have like my day like scheduled in a certain way because
Yeah.
like I have a dog. That's the
Mhm.
first thing. That's very difficult, right? And I
Yeah.
also like to work out and I also like to stay
Yeah.
healthy. And then I have a corporate job and then I like to do comedy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh fuck. So I have to wake up at a certain point. I have
Mhm.
to do this for a certain number of minutes and then
Yeah.
so like there are certain parts where I just can't afford to get sidetracked. But
Mhm.
that's the beautiful part of the creative world is like
Yeah.
sometimes I'll just sit down and I'm like, I want to focus on my set. And then Alex will say something hilarious. I'm like, but yeah, let's just riff this out right now. And then
Yeah.
Amos will sit down and I want to hear
Yeah.
about him. And then next thing you know, I'm on deck and I haven't even opened my phone. I'm like, well. So sometimes it's okay to let the organization
Yeah.
go out the window and your
Yeah.
aspirations go out the window because that's what the moment presented
And
itself.
you're having fun at the same time. Which
Yes.
Fun will always make everything like come together.
Fun is actually the only sustainable thing.
Yeah.
It really is. Fun is the only sustainable thing. Relationships fall apart because there's no longer fun. People quit comedy because it's no longer fun.
Yeah.
That's what I'm very sensitive to, right? Like these sketches that I'm working on with Hunter and Will. I make sure they're paid because I don't
Yeah.
believe if I'm working with my friends. A lot of people ask
Yeah.
for like favor. I pay them full.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever they think they're going to get, maybe a little more. But
Yeah.
B, when we're sitting down to make this, I'm like, is this like, are you having fun? And they're like,
Yeah.
yes. I'm like, good. Because
Yeah.
if not, then like, let's pause. Like, what's the problem? Like,
Yeah.
let's make it more fun. Like, fun is the only sustainable thing. That's it. If you're working with other people. And I think, honestly, it also is if you're working with yourself. But I
Yeah.
think you have a higher tolerance
Mhm.
to tolerate longer
Yeah.
periods of fun by yourself than
Yeah.
you have to tolerate as a group no fun. Because if you're not having fun as a group, then you're like, I'm just gonna go by myself.
Yeah.
So like you have to. Fun is like essential. It's the only.
Yeah.
No fun is the detriment of like anything that you hope to last for a while.
Yeah. That it's even like by yourself. Like sometimes I'm like, dude, why am I even doing this? I'm
Yeah.
not even I'm not enjoying myself.
Right.
And that's when I start to get depressed because it's like,
Mhm.
dude, there's no point in me doing this. So the whole purpose of, like, for example, with comedy, whole purpose is to have fun, right? Like, I
Right.
want to do this as a job because it's fun, not because whatever, right? So, and then I see myself like maybe like 1 or 2 weeks and I'm not even having fun. I'm like, what
Right.
the fuck am I doing, dude?
Right. And a lot of times too, fun, people think of it like fun can come in a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
in a lot of different and what's fun for certain people is different than what's fun for other people. Like
Yeah.
sometimes if I'm feeling sad, what I like to have fun is like talk to somebody about their day, and then
Yeah.
it's like you watch their eye, like. Dude, a lot of times comedians just are so alone, and then you
Yeah.
have a conversation with them, and you just see it in their eyes. They're like, "Oh shit, I get to talk to someone about my day."
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fun for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have friends that are like, "You're literally retarded. That's not fun at all." But like, I enjoy that. I enjoy talking
Yeah.
to other people about their day. So it's
Yeah.
like, find what your fun is and know how to pivot into it. If you're finding like a extended stretch where you're like, this is not fun at all, then
Yeah.
go do the fun things. That's why like this shocks a lot of people. I like to like microdose a lot of drugs because
Mhm.
then I'm like, I'm not having fun today. Like, let me just do a little bit of
Yeah.
mushrooms, and then they're gonna show me the way.
Yeah.
And then what's fun is accidentally taking a little too much, and then you're like, I guess tonight we're just holding on for our lives.
Yeah.
That's fun. So like, yeah, just figure out how to have fun. Comedy is just way too hard and lonely to not have fun. And
Yeah.
everything that is bad about everything that you want to avoid
Mhm.
is not fun at its core. It's not fun comparison. That's not fun
Yeah.
at all. what's not fun? Acting like a specific show where a mic is like a make or break thing, and you're gonna beat yourself up. Anything that is bad, just ask yourself, is it fun? And the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
So like, just have fun. Like it's very simple. Just have fucking fun and enjoy your friends in the comedy game, because they could be gone. And I don't mean that in a depressing way. It's like people get plucked and they're just gone. Like, they may stop, but a lot of times, like, I think a lot of my friends around me are very, very talented. And it's like, I may just blink and they're just on tour. And it's like, wow, that was fun while it lasted.
Yeah.
You know? So fun is like the key. It's the most important thing.
Yeah. Dude, this is something that I'm very impressed by, because it seems like you don't sleep. And I'll give you an example. I typically sleep like 7 or 8 hours, and that's what I need.
Right.
If I sleep less, I can maybe get by with 1 or 2 days. After the third one, I'm done. Right.
Right.
On Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was, I came back from Mike's, and it was like maybe 12 or 1 in the morning. And then I woke up. I don't wake up with an alarm. My body just wakes up whenever, right? I woke up at 5. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Typically, if I do that, if I get like 3 or 4 hours of sleep, I don't work out. Because if I work out, I'm like, oh, well, then I'll start to get sick or whatever. So I don't do it. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to work out. So I went for a run, and I'm starting to feel a little shitty, and then I was drained the whole day. But I made sure, like, I took like some vitamins or something just to like keep my immune system strong. But it took me like 2 days to recover.
Right.
How the fuck do you do that?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's because there's usually probably one day every 2 months where I just completely crash, but I don't fight it. I like kind of feel it coming, and then as I kind of feel like, in the next week or two, I'm going to be zapped.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll just kind of just accept it as it comes. And then sometimes it comes earlier and sometimes it comes later. But I feel like I've always been able to like function on like little sleep. Like I probably sleep about 4 hours a night, 4 to 5, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I'm it's reached a point where it's like something that I'm like proud of and like excited by. So I like to just go when I'm like tired.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like it would be harder if I had like a specific part of my life that I wasn't excited about. Like if I was doing all this for a corporate job, it would be exhausting.
Yeah.
But I'm doing all this to like hopefully build a life that I'm like pumped about down the road.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I like functioning off of. It's not that didn't really answer your question, but it's like it's just it's like what I. This is douchey, but it's what I do. I like to sleep
I get
4 to 5 hours is good until I hit a wall, and then I sleep for the entire day. I'll drop my dog off at my parents' place, and I'll just sleep the entire fucking day. So I don't have to worry about, because if she's around and I'm like trying to crash the entire day, it doesn't work. I'm like, I gotta walk her. I want to go out, have fun with her, take her to the park, stuff
and
like that.
And she'll make it a point to wake you up.
1,000%. Like I'll take a nap, and then I'll wake up and she's staring at me. She's like, you should be doing something right now. It's not even like she wants me to play with her. She's like, what are you?
What the fuck is this?
Yeah. It's 3. You should be doing. You're not usually in bed. I'm like, fuck, you're right, dude. I should be up. But I don't know. I have a friend that I like grab dinner with every month, and he's like my another one of my best friends. But I've known him since the first year of college. I was like the best man at his wedding, and he's grabbing dinner with him is like one of the things that I do to like maintain like being a human being outside of comedy. And we're doing our goals for the next year, and I'm writing a bunch of goals, and I almost wrote sleep more, and then I was like, nah, I'm not. Maybe one day if I have like a family or something, like then I'll sleep then. But like for now, I'm not gonna do the whole sleep more thing. I'll keep working the way I need to work.
Does your body like feel like it's worn down, or no? You just feel insane?
No,
normal?
I think what it is too is it's. I like to. So when I say I work out, I do heavy exercise about 3 days a week, probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And then Monday through Thursday, 2 of those days I'll do like long bits of like cardio. Yeah. Probably like, I'll run like 5 miles early in the morning. But then those other 2 days I'll just go on like a walk, right? Okay. So like to just kind of keep my brain like working, because a lot of times like I think a bad workout is better than no workout. And
Yeah.
if you go too hard for a while, then you'll just stop working out for a week.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, it's been 2 weeks. And the next thing you know, your diet slipped. And then you're depressed about how you look.
Yeah.
Or you're like, fuck, dude, I was just good. Like, not even like
Yeah.
2-3 weeks ago. So I think for me, a lot of it is I play with my effort levels in different parts of my life.
Yeah.
To make sure that it's not like completely like zapped out all the time,
Yeah.
you know, because a lot of it's not just doing stuff, it's how much effort you put into the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I work out, I go to work, I play with my dog, I like to like eat well, I like to work on sketches, I like to work on comedy. The bars, if you have 100% to give every day, the different levels within that 100% are all over the place. Sometimes the workout is a 5%. It's just a walk for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sweaty by the time I get back. I just still hop in the shower, you know,
Yeah.
take care. So it's like a lot of it is just measuring my effort levels because I really like to have like a good amount of effort for the evenings.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just working out in the morning. I'm like, well, today the name of the game at work is act like I'm doing something while they just leave me alone, you know? So that's like, and all that it's also like I do play with like the perception of like work and stuff. Like I like to like text or call my boss like Fridays at like 7, like after work, like 7 p.m. So it looks like I'm always working hard.
If you want, I can cut this.
No, I don't give a shit. He's not gonna watch this. But like that's like if I have like a question or something, I'll wait till like after work. So in his head, I'm like, oh, Robert's like working.
Yeah, he's.
But really, I could have asked you this at 8 a.m. But I want you to have this perception that I'm working.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really just like. Yeah, just putting different effort levels in different parts of my life so I can always keep going and remaining sustainable. I really only have the same amount of energy every day. I just use it in different areas.
Yeah, okay. I see that. Like my dad, for example, he always takes like a nap in the afternoon. And I always saw that. I'm like, well, he never sleeps well at night.
Right.
And I think it's because of the nap because he takes like a really nice nap, but then he had a problem like, well, I didn't really sleep that much at night.
Right.
So I saw that as an issue like, oh man, I'm not going to take naps because then that'll just mess my entire sleep schedule off.
Right.
But in comedy, like the whole game is at night. So maybe I should take naps and then that way I could
take naps. But also don't get it twisted. You're around a lot of people that do a shit ton of cocaine and Adderall. So like that's for me, it's like that's the craziest thing is like I'm fairly sober for comedy. Like which is weird because I love uppers, but I just had an Adderall problem for a long time and then I completely quit it basically right as I was starting comedy. So that was probably the most difficult stretch. But yeah, like don't get it twisted. You're around a lot of people that are on performance enhancing drugs. That's why they can go at night. And also like, have you ever talked to a comedian about how their day was? And they're like, yeah, I was busy. And like, oh shit, what'd you do? He's like, yeah, I was door dashing from like 11 to 3. I'm like, I want to fucking punch you right now. Like this is bullshit. So it's like, yeah, you're around a lot of people that have energy in the evenings, like for a reason. It's like they just the rest of that's where the comparison comes in, where it's like, just be aware of your own limits because if you constantly push them before you're ready to kind of slowly break them down, you're gonna crash down the road.
Yeah, because that's another thing. Like this, like the last year and a half, I've had 2 jobs, which is not something I really want to do. But like before we moved here, my wife didn't have a job, so we went from a place where we didn't pay rent to a place where we were paying like $2,000 all at once. It's like a big jump, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll take this job, and then and this is just while my wife gets her job. And then suddenly, I like having extra cash. Oh, that's a big problem, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm like dealing with like juggling this, but I want to do comedy, whatever.
Right.
So it took me like a minute to be like, okay, maybe I should. I haven't quit the job, by the way, but maybe I should quit one of those jobs. Yeah. So
it's a lot of it too is like, people have. My mom has this saying where it's like, I used to eat with my eyes. So it's like, you go to a buffet and you're like, I want to eat that. But then when it comes to actually eating, it's like you can't eat with your eyes. You're going to get full and you're going to throw up. Yeah. That's how I kind of treat my own life, where a lot of times it's like you eat with your eyes. You're like, I want to do this. You find out very quickly what you actually want to do, because things that you think are cool or fun or like aspirational or like whatever, they get in the way of what you actually want to do. And then you sacrifice your effort in that area, and what you're most sad about failing, that's your thing.
Yeah.
The thing that you are like, oh shit, it's not a big deal that this is falling to the wayside. It's way worse that this is falling to the wayside.
Yeah.
You're like, that's my thing. You know, it's kind of like friendships too. And this is what I used to be bad about. And one of my goals for 2024 is like, I used to treat like everybody the same in a good way.
Yeah.
And then what I found was that I was treating the people that I could barely tolerate the exact same way that I could treat my friends. And then I'm like, that's not good. And then you're giving everyone that energy, and in a way you're treating yourself the worst of all, because you barely have any mental capacity or energy for yourself. So like, you know, the effort and the energy you put towards your habits and your hobbies need to parallel the way you treat other people, because you want to invest in the people that you care about and let the people that don't really matter fall to the wayside. And what's interesting is I slowly start to do it, and you get weird reactions from people, but then you get people that are healthy, like get it. It's like, I just don't know you. Like, we'll be friends. If you're here in like a year, we'll probably end up being friends. But the energy you put towards things that you care about needs to mirror the energy you put towards people that you care about. Yeah. And because overall you need to save some for yourself in both areas.
Because if you don't, like you said, if you don't do it for yourself, you're going to crash at some point. And it's...
Yeah, what you're doing it for is like pretty much everything. It comes back to like the fun part. Are you doing it to have fun? That's really important. I think Seinfeld said, if you do it for the money, it'll never come. But if you do it for the process and the art, the money will come. Yeah. And that's just how it, you know, that's I could debate that, but he's overall, I think he's right.
The richest one too.
Yeah, he's the richest one, and he kind of got that. I also think you kind of have to be opportunistic with that stuff. You can't just. There's nothing admirable about being a starving artist. I hate that shit. No, dude. It's bullshit. But yeah, you have to do it for the art of it and the process of it, and not for other people's admiration and claps and chasing other people. That's the wrong thing.
And that's also the more sustainable part of it. Like,
yeah, if you're chasing someone and you don't really know them, or you don't really know what they're capable of, you don't know what their motivations are. Like, that's what I like. I think I'm lucky to have, like, because I've failed in so much before comedy, and I feel like in a way it worked out where I got to apply all my lessons and myself, the best version of myself, towards something that is totally me. Is like, when I first started doing comedy, when I first started doing music shit, I tried to do 2 record labels. The first one I did for a year, and I ended up, basically the guy that was my business partner, I didn't know very well, so I did no contracts. It was all over the table, handshakes, blah, blah, investing. And he basically ended up stealing about $15,000 from me when I was like 23. Yeah, and so that was a lesson where I'm like, oh, like I could have just been investing in either my buddy or myself, but instead I was chasing this guy because he was connected to a music production label that at the time was pretty big. Well, funny story, a year after I left, they just burned to the ground. Okay. So in my head, I'm like, oh, I was chasing a guy who was chasing another person. I didn't know that guy, and the thing he was chasing failed. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, just don't chase. Yeah. Like, there's whatever you're chasing, you can also build. You just have to start. Yeah. A lot of people don't want to start building their own thing. A lot of people want to jump on someone else's thing. And that's something that I realize and I take to heart when I'm doing something. It's like, I think almost everybody genuinely believes they can be a very good number 2. Yeah. Almost no one's going to just be the number 1. Yeah. Like, everyone, when they hear you're doing, every time I hear, I mention I do sketches, which I don't even mention to anymore. A, I haven't dropped any yet. B, I just work a lot on them to stack them up. Yeah. When I mention I do sketches, the number 1 reason why I don't bring it up anymore, everyone goes, dude, I got some sketch ideas. I'm like, you probably don't. Yeah. Like, because people don't realize that I have sketch ideas is almost identical to when you tell someone you do comedy. They go, I got a joke for you. And you're like, fuck, you don't, dude. Like, you have to learn how to think about this shit and write it. So a lot of everybody thinks genuinely, it's not a manipulative thing. They're not trying to take advantage of me. They just genuinely think they can contribute. And they can't. So like everybody wants to be number 2. Very few people will just start being the number 1. Yeah. And it's way more beneficial to start being the number 1 at ground zero than to just try to latch on to someone who's like years ahead and try to just ride their wave, because you have no idea what their aspirations of. You have no idea what they're actually capable of. You also have no idea what their reputation is. Yeah. You try to ride their wave, and then you're going to end up in a weird spot with people who don't like them, or they have a weird situation with a certain venue or something, and suddenly you've just
that's
adopted
that's
that.
yours now.
Yeah,
so.
and you didn't do anything to fucking deserve that. So yeah, yeah, the chasing is a weird thing.
Yeah. And it's funny that you learned that with something completely different,
Yes.
and then now you're like, oh, I can apply this to this now.
Yes, I've learned so much shit in my, because I've always just tried really hard. That's like the only consistent part of my life in every aspect, relationships, business, work. I've always just tried really, really hard, and I don't care if it fails, because I'm like, oh, well, that was just a thing that I learned, and then you apply it. It's very much like a stock graph where you go up and then you fail, and then you go up a little higher. It's all about higher lows and higher highs, where it's like you're gonna dip back down, and it's like, yeah, I've learned a shit ton of shit from everything that I've done before comedy started. So it's like I used to be insecure about my age when it came to comedy, and now it's like, man, I really just progressed in a lot of areas that people never really did.
Yeah.
And so it's not a big deal, because people may be ahead, but it's all about the foundation that you're setting for the future comedian that you're going to hope to be.
Yeah.
And it's not all of it is on stage.
And you're still how old are you?
I'm 29.
Dude, you're still young.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, I like to tell myself that, but a lot of times Austin has so many good young comedians. Like, oh, fuck, dude. You're 24 and you're a killer. God damn it. It's like I'm sitting here saying, don't compare yourself. Yeah. And I'm never really jealous. I admire a lot of these young guys. It's cool. But then it's like, dude, you're fucking awesome. This is going to be. Yeah, I am grateful for the young people in the scene, though, because they're hopefully going to be here for a while, so they're turning people's tastes and attention to comedy in a very good way. But yeah, there's some young killers in this scene where it's like, holy shit.
I think what's most admirable to me, at least, is that the fact that they figured out, oh, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to go all in.
Dude, figuring out, if you figure out your thing early, that's like I think that's like luck, because it's like, I think a lot of time figuring out who you are is just a cycle of figuring out who you're not, and figuring out what you want to be is a cycle of figuring out what you can't be. And then eventually you're like, oh, this is my thing. But you're just going to be banging your head against a wall for a while until you burst through. And then you're like, oh, that's what it was the whole time. Yeah. You just have to try. That's the only thing that you can do.
Life is trial and error. And at least it took me a long time to figure that out.
Right.
And by the time I'm like, oh, this is what life is. Oh, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
No one. No one. That's how you learn to forgive your parents. That's how you learn to forgive the people in your past. It's like, you're just trying. You're a lot. Unless you believe the people in your past that you really don't like were malicious or evil people. Yeah. Most people are just dumb. Yeah. They just don't know what they're doing, and they're trying their best. And then eventually you're like, oh, that was just someone that was dumb and not knowing what they're doing. And we're those people all the time. So it's it's just a cycle.
Yeah. What did someone teach you all this stuff, or being for example, putting the different pieces of something else into this thing, or was that something you just learned on your own?
I just learned. I've always been very, very independent. In fact, a lot of it I hid from people, because I think as soon as you start talking about what you're doing, people have expectations. Yeah. And that's very toxic, because then I don't want to disappoint people. And so, no, I've always just I've just spent a lot of my life trying and thinking. That's about it. And then you just you're like, oh, yeah, that's a thing that can be here too. Yeah. It's the same. You see parallels in everything, comedy, art, jokes, accomplishments. It's all about seeing how you can apply what you already have. Yeah. You need to figure out what you already have, and you put that to work. That's what it is. A lot, there's that saying when it comes to parenting, where it's you try so hard to give your kids what they didn't have that you forget to give them what they did have, what you did have, because a lot of things, having immigrant parents, it's obvious that they spent a lot of their life trying to give me what they didn't have. Yeah. When in reality, some of the most valuable shit that they gave me is shit that they did have. Yeah. That's how it is in your life. You spend a lot of time trying to figure out how you can cover up your deficiencies. Yeah. In reality, you should apply what you already have and what you've learned. And so that's just something that it's just, I don't know, it's made sense where I'm like, oh, that's just something that was a thing before, and it can also be a thing here, and I might as well, because it hurt to learn this lesson, and it hurt to get this skill, so I'm going to put it to good use. Yeah. Yeah. Because
the stuff that I've learned, it's either from, obviously, it took, trial and error, but a lot of it, like I'm big into self-development stuff,
For sure.
and
You can't say that, by the way, because people will put a fucking label on you. They'll think you're fucking David Goggins and shit. Even though I fuck with him, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get you.
But it's good, yeah.
So, and like learning from other people's stuff, it's like, oh, okay, I can put that in there, and then that's how I started to like put my stuff, like that's how I learned to do trial and error. But
Right.
before I was afraid to try, like up until I was like maybe 18, I didn't like, dude, I was afraid of a bunch of shit.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't try anything because I was afraid of what people would think of me and things like that. So up until like, especially like I sucked, dude. I was horrible with women. Like back in I was so bad. And the first thing that I tried was like, oh, maybe I should learn how. There's got to be someone's written a book about this,
Right.
and then that's like how that spiraled into like me getting into comedy and stuff
Right.
like that.
Yes.
So
A lot of it too was like it was weird. Like oddly enough, like drugs have played a big role.
yeah,
Because it was like I had a lot of pressure as a young kid to be something big because I was the
Yeah.
firstborn in a family of immigrants.
yeah,
And that's like the most pressure, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like your first generation in the
Yeah.
country and you're like, oh, fuck, dude. God damn it. And so I felt burnt out. And then I started doing drugs and I'm like, oh, I can be my own person.
yeah,
But then it's like, but I'm not going to be productive. And then college started and I learned that I could be a productive drug addict. And then after college ended, I learned that I could just be productive. So it's like, it's been like a wave of like learning what I can or can't do. But yeah, like also, you know, like leadership roles in college, that was a big one because I used to be in a fraternity. And then I was like, I'll be vice president. And then I just did it. And I was like, oh shit, I could do that too. Women, that was a big thing. I really struggled with women till probably midway through college because I kept like once you join a fraternity, the women are there,
yeah,
and then you hook up with them, but they don't stick, and then you're
Yeah.
like, well, that's not, you know, I kind of
Yeah.
want to. So then you start learning about that, and you're like, oh, I just got to fix myself. There's
Mhm.
like no games to it, and then so you
Yeah.
like fix yourself there, and you start getting in shape. You start thinking clearly. You start, you know, having accomplishments. So yeah, it's all just a wave of like figuring out what you have to offer and figuring out what parts of yourself have to die. That's
Yeah.
another. That's a very sad reality. That I mean.
Yeah.
It's necessary though, but
Yeah.
yeah, figuring out what parts of yourself should die are like really pretty important too.
Yeah, I think that's like you mentioned this earlier. Like a lot of knowing who you are is knowing who you're not.
Exactly.
And if you don't do that, then you're just gonna be dragging those pieces along,
Right.
And they're not serving you.
Right. And a lot of another like hard lesson that I had to learn, and this is, I mean, people will debate me on this. I really think you can't like help people.
Mm-hmm.
I think you really like, because a lot of my life I spent like trying to invest and pour
Yeah.
into other people and being like, you should do this, you should do that. A, I was doing that because I was afraid to apply it towards myself.
Mhm.
And B, all those situations ended up being disappointing.
Yeah.
So like figuring out who you are and focusing on yourself, I think is way better than the whole chasing,
Yeah.
because of a lot of times you'll just be giving people advice and effort,
Yeah.
and they're just not gonna change. Who they are is who they are, and it's not gonna ever change.
It's that saying, you can't lead. Well, you can lead a horse to water, but the horse needs to drink the water.
Exactly.
So-
And a lot of times you really shouldn't even be leading the horse to begin with. Why do you have
Yeah.
a horse? Just fucking go. You go find the water and drink
Yeah.
from it, and then
Yeah.
move on. Leave the horse. You know, like
Yeah.
I think it's really, really hard to change people, and I think it's
Yeah.
something I had to learn myself from a young age. And once you see that in other people, you apply it to yourself in a way where it's like, oh, I have to learn what I am, because that.
Yeah.
When you try to change other people, you're just learning who they are and that they're not going to change. So you
Yeah.
have to learn that part about yourself so you can double down on that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you said you grew up in Vermont,
Mm-hmm.
up until how old were you?
Like 12.
12?
Yes.
Okay. How do you have like good memories from Vermont?
Kind of. I remember when my dad told us we're going to move to Austin, I told him, you're ruining my life, which was so funny because Vermont sucks. Yeah. I don't know. It was, I think Vermont is the root of why I'm like such an introvert at heart, and
Mhm.
like I don't mind being alone for long periods of time, because Vermont is like very alone for like long periods of time. It's like, it's a very, isolated place. you learn how to have fun just in your own little world. Yeah, I think my creativity was developed in Vermont. Vermont has basements. A lot of houses have basements. So you go downstairs, and then for about 4 hours, you just invent shit in your head, and it's a very creative time. And my parents also were very strict about me not playing video games.
Yeah.
So I would just be going downstairs. I would be making up games. And so Vermont, I'm grateful for it. I don't know if I loved it, but I know it's an integral part of like who I was and like why I'm like creative and like fine with like being alone is because that's what Vermont was. It's like it's cold, it's basements, it's being alone, and you know it was cool. I still have some friends in Vermont. I still have fond memories. We still have our house in Vermont, so I go take retreats every 2 to 3 years where I'm just by myself. And last time I went, I wrote like a lot of different sketches that I've shot now. But like I've wanted to go back to Vermont and just kind of just be in the house for like a few days and just like really like isolate myself. But it's Vermont is something I'm grateful for, and I'll probably like it more when I'm old. It's an old person. Yeah. Like Austin is a young person place. Vermont is an old person place. It's very quiet and slow. There's really no aspiration. The sad part about Vermont is it's all my friends pretty much now work at like a food shelter or like a grocery store, or they've killed themselves. That's just the reality of what it is. And honestly, this is not even a joke. This is I sent like a screenshot to my buddy that lives in Austin, a guy that I used to be friends with. He posts like super depressing statuses all the time, and I screenshot him because I'm a piece of shit. But his most recent one, he was like, yeah, if things don't get better, I don't know how much longer I'll be around. I'm like, great, that will be like the 8th person I've known in Vermont that kills himself. Damn. So yeah, Vermont, it's just slow, man. It's a slow place with there's no drive. I could have never, like, my dad moving us to Austin was like the jackpot. Yeah. Even though I told him I was keeping my life, but I was just I was 10 years old and just passionate. Kid, you don't know, I thought it was cool that I was the cool kid in Vermont. Even though honestly I really wasn't at all either. I wasn't even like popular. I don't even know what I thought I was losing. I played clarinet in a band. That was about it. And then I moved to Lake Travis, which that was a big culture shock too, because I went from Vermont where it's like, we were doing all right. Interestingly enough about Vermont, I got to like see the rise in social classes because we moved from like a decent house to like a nice house, and then we moved to like the nicest place in all, like maybe the wealthiest area code, zip code in Texas, if not one of the. So it was like the first 15 years of my life were like a big, just rapid culture shocks because I'd go to my grandparents' place growing up, and my grandma lived in a very tiny apartment, very, very tiny. Both of them did, but I'd spend time there. And then I moved to like a nice house for Vermont, which is like, less than $200,000, but it's like, it's a nice house. And then you move to Lake Travis, and it's like, it's mansions. Yeah. And there's like a statistic in America where most people you will die in the same social class that you were born in. Like, it's particularly bad in America. Like, whatever income class you were born in, you're going to die in like 80% of people or something. Don't quote me on that. I got to like see all of them. I like rose through them. So that was like a very unique thing where I was like, that's just, it's weird. People are like all the same, but they're like kind of different too. So like I got to see like the rise and stuff. But yeah, Vermont is, I would say something that I'll like, maybe I'll retire there one day or something, but I don't. But that's me and Hunter bonded because he's from Vermont. Yeah. So that's like, I've kind of found good friends in Vermont.
But you guys didn't know each other before here?
No, randomly he was talking about Vermont, so he was like, are you from Vermont? He's like, yeah, and then we just like became friends. Okay. It was a very elementary way to become friends. It was like, you're from here? Yeah, okay, cool. And that's like, it's back to like our like roots of like just being kids and be like, you like this? Like, yeah, okay, we'll be friends. And then like that was it. But yeah.
Did you still, when you moved to Austin, were you still in the band?
No, so I tried out and they're like, you're not very good. And I was like, oh shit. So I just stopped. I stopped doing band stuff and I started doing drugs. Honestly, I would So that period of my life, when we moved to Austin, my mom was very attached to her family that was in Montreal, which was about an hour and a half from my house in Vermont. So what we'd do is during the summers, she'd bring us back up north. So I started basically, it was very hard for me to make friends because I'd make friends during the school year, and then during summer when you're hanging out with your friends, I'd leave. So I started hanging out with my cousin, who's like, he was here recently actually. When I was 12, he was 18. And that's like the perfect level of like, well, I guess I'll just start doing drugs with this guy now.
Yeah.
So like, I didn't do band. They were like, you're not good. And I was like, fuck. So what I started doing is I started doing drugs and getting fucked up at a young age and learning how to do that shit. And I started doing baseball.
Okay.
Which was I was the manager that was high as fuck, just hanging out with my friends who were actually good at sports, and I quit baseball for the opposite reason that everyone else quit baseball. You know, like I think everybody at a certain point reaches a point where they're not getting the play time that they want, so they just quit, or they don't get to be on the team that they want, so they just quit. I wanted to be the varsity manager so I could get high and fucked up with my friends who are on varsity. And my coach wanted me to play as like a team captain on JV. And I was like, no, you don't get it. No. This should be easy. I don't want to play. Just let me be the manager. And he's like, no, you're going to be like a leader. And I'm like, I'm done with this shit. So, yeah, I did baseball for about 3-4 years. And then my coach wouldn't let me just be high in the dugout. So I was like, well, I'm done with this now.
You could have been the next Ken Griffey. You're like, fuck this.
Yeah. He's like, you can be a leader on JV. I'm like, why? I just I still look back. I'm like, what could he possibly have seen in me? I didn't do anything. I was just a prankster and an asshole, and I would talk shit, and I would just be like goofy and like funny. Like that's what was my thing. I was the high guy in baseball, and he was like, no, this guy's gonna be your starting shortstop. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that at all. So yeah, I didn't do band. I did baseball and drugs. That's what I would do.
And do you think that led you to get into a fraternity, or like what brought you to a fraternity?
Yeah, so what led me to a fraternity, so it's interesting. Texas Tech, a lot of people don't know this, like about Texas Tech. In my opinion, if you're a dude and you want to have a social life with socially competent people, you have to be in a fraternity. With the women, it's different, like, because guys don't give a shit. So to put it into perspective, I think there's like 9 sororities and like 27 fraternities.
Oh wow, okay.
So if you're not in a fraternity and you're not an athlete, you're like an engineer that plays like Humans vs. Zombies.
Yeah.
And so for me, I remember looking around being like, okay, I spent 8th grade through high school not really having a social life, really just being the high introvert and like kind of hanging out with my friends in like their houses, but never learning how to be like socially competent. Like, yeah, I would go to house parties and stuff from time to time. I was like, I need to be in a fraternity. And I remember that was the first thing that I like really battled my parents on. And from their perspective, I understood why they didn't want me to be in a fraternity, but then it just reached a point where I was like, I'm just going to do it anyway. So I joined. And it was cool. I don't regret it at all. I think it was awesome. I think fraternities teach you a lot. I think the stereotypes about why people don't like fraternities is very accurate, except for the gay shit. Like, we never did gay shit, and we didn't really beat the shit. Like, the hazing and the gay shit is, like, kind of from, like, movies.
Yeah.
Like, that's, like, it's not the same. But also, people, like, fraternities teach you a lot. Like, yeah, dude, you're going to have to pay for your friends in some capacity. You're going to be alone. You're just going to, you end up hanging out with your people that are either from work or like your same neighborhood. That's you paying for your friends, you know? And also, like, it's really important to learn how to be socially fucked up. Like, learning how to drink socially is a very important skill. Yeah. You're not going to be sober your whole life, and you don't want to learn in your mid-20s to late 20s that you're the shit show at office parties. You don't want to learn that. So that was being in a fraternity. I love being in a fraternity. I think it's ironic that a lot of comedians shit on being in a fraternity because it's like, really? You're afraid of like being humiliated in front of your peers, like that's what you're like shitting on fraternity guys for. It's like, at least we get to pledge after 3 months. Some people never get to pledge for like 10 years in a comedy, like in comedy, and like you're never going to be accepted, you know. So it's like, it's being in a fraternity is it's fine, it's cool. I don't know what it's going to be like in the future, and if I have a son and he wants to be in one, I'll be like, yeah, let's talk about it. But Yeah, that was cool. I joined a fraternity when I got to college because it was just that college. It's not. I don't know if it's the same for other places, but like in Lubbock and especially in tech, if you want to be anything, you should be in a. That's as a guy. Yeah.
Dude, anytime I saw a fraternity in a movie, it just seemed like so cool.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I'm like, oh, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yes.
You know?
And guys can bitch about it all they want. Girls really like it, and it's like, yes, okay, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of fraternity guys that like roofie girls, but guess what? When they find one that doesn't, which ours never did, and I know that because I was on the exec board for multiple years.
Yeah.
They have a fun time, dude. They don't want to go to your fucking dorm. They don't want to go to like having a fraternity house or like a house party that's like bigger than the normal house party. Yeah, and you also like learn to like hold your own and like be like cool and like have you learn a lot in fraternities. And again, I get why people shit on them, but it's like the pros and cons are like pretty equal, man.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. So I liked it. I think being a fraternity is pretty cool, but I understand being in a fraternity cool. Frat dudes can be very douchey. I'll fucking admit that for sure. There's no argument there.
I think there's just douchey people in general.
Yes.
So it's just if you focus on the fraternity, there's going to be douches there. Oh, you focus on comedy, there's going to be douches.
Yes.
You go to high school, there's douches there.
Yes.
Wherever you're going to go, there's always going to be a douche if you look.
Yes. Like we would go out all the time with different fraternities, and a lot of times the biggest douchebags were the bartenders. Like that's just a lot of the biggest douchebags are the bouncers. Like it's just like there's douchebags fucking everywhere in those environments. Yeah. It's just I think douchiness is like the prerequisite to like the corporate like boss like fucking energy, because once you get in the corporate world or just any sort of job, you're gonna meet like those fake alphas that like think they run the fucking office. So it's like you're just learning how to digest that shit, because you're not gonna go anywhere where that's not a thing. They're gonna be everywhere, and you just have to learn how to handle it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't go to a fraternity or anything like that, but like in high school, I got along with most of the people in my class. It was a small class. It was like 60 people.
Right.
But everything, I grew up in Costa Rica, so everything was like sheltered, right?
Right.
And so the first experience I had of just being like alone and like meeting new people, I guess college a little bit, but when I moved to America, and so I went to like acting class.
Right.
And dude, I knew nobody.
Right.
I had nothing. And so, like, you starting to make friends, and you don't even know where that was kind of my fraternity. I'm like, oh, I got to learn how to be a person again.
Right.
So that was really cool for me. I didn't take advantage of it the way I should have.
Right.
But I could see how, like, in your experience with the fraternity, that was kind of like my version, air quotes.
Right. And the fraternity also just taught me to, like, not be learning how to be selfless for the sake of a whole is like a very important thing, because like a lot of times when you go out, you have to realize that you're kind of representing your fraternity. And like if you're going to be a shit show, those girls aren't just going to go like fuck that dude. They're going to go fuck his fraternity, right? Yeah. And it's cool too, because a lot of times what you learn is that like your actions at the smallest level really do have like a repercussion on the whole on like a big level. Yeah. And a lot of people don't learn that until it's too late. Like I know being a comedian is like a different thing, but most people end up getting a job. Yeah. And some sort of job environment, and it's like they learn way too late, like, wow, just because I sent this one email or just because I talked to this person while wearing my polo in public. And yes, dude, you are that thing. You, like, to people's perception, you are who you work for. You are who you represent on your chest. So, like, have that in your head when you're interacting with people, you know? That's something that, like, I had to learn, like, very quickly. And, again, a big part of it, too, was learning how to be fucked up socially. Yeah. Like, being drunk but still having to, like, hold a conversation, not be a shit show, not fucking throw up everywhere, not get carried out of the bar, don't start fights with people, learn how to just handle yourself if the fight, like, breaks out. Like, that's something that, like, I think people are a little bit surprised about, because I still have that thing inside of me where if, like, someone's gonna start a fight, I'm not gonna like back. Like there was this mic this past Thursday at Tiniest Bar. There was this guy was like chirping and like trying to like start shit with people on stage.
Oh, the guy with the Dallas.
Yes, yes. And I stood up. I was like, "What do you want?" And then immediately he's like, I want to sign up. I'm like, then go fucking sign up. But it's like that energy, you like find it within yourself when you have to be like handle like in those situations. A lot of times, if you're not in those situations by a certain age, you're gonna shrink in the public, and that's like, I don't know. I don't think that's a good. You want to have a backbone. You want to learn to like hold your own. Like my third year in my fraternity, I was sergeant at arms, and that's a role on the exec board.
Mm-hmm.
First, I was vice president. I was sergeant at arms, and sergeant at arms is you have to like make sure. This was like before Uber. Like, you have to make sure people have a DD. You have to make sure the fucked up people are all right. You have to make sure if fights happen, you're like breaking it up, dude. I used to, at my size, I would deal with giant dudes on cocaine, and it's like you just learn like the situation isn't really what it is. You just have to fucking handle it, like talk with your chest and like fucking calm people down. But like that's a very valuable situation. I would have never learned how to handle people on cocaine if I wasn't like in a fraternity. That sounds like a weird thing.
Yeah.
But like with comedy now, there's like no heckler that I'm like, what do you do? What do you want to do, dude? Like you're like learning how to diffuse energy. It's a very valuable thing. Not being scared of people, even if they're 6'5" on cocaine. Yeah. Like that's a fun thing. Learning how to just like kind of get out of a fight. That's a valuable thing. Like, but those are all things that you should want to like test it out in college, because in high school that's weird. You're still a kid. After college, that's like a little too late. You don't want to be in your mid to late 20s being like, oh, this is what a fight feels like. College, it's like you're sort of becoming an adult. You're sort of learning how to handle fucked up people, and just understanding that outside of like the rare like, oh, this guy's a psycho and he's really trying to hurt people, you can kind of handle that situation where it's like, okay, let's just relax. Let's diffuse. What do you want? Like, let's talk, you know? So that, there's a lot of valuable shit you learn from being in a fraternity, but most people just kind of go off the movies.
Which, by the way, that sounds like so responsible, which is like the complete opposite of what people think a fraternity is.
Right. And don't get me wrong, that might have just been my approach to the fraternity too, because I always took it. Like, also, don't get me wrong, I mean, this is incriminating at some point, but I don't give a shit. I was dealing mushrooms in college. I was dealing drugs like in college a lot. Me and my buddy were like, we were like the Xanax plug for all of Lubbock at a certain point, like pushing way too much money, like buying shit off the deep net. I remember we were doing math one time, like recently. I was like, how much Bitcoin do you think you had / we went through? And in modern day valuations, it was about $8 million of Bitcoin.
My God.
But at the time, 2011, 2012, we're on the Silk Road, like buying drugs. Like, I don't want to make it seem like I was just, the fraternity was like a learning space. We were getting completely obliterated all the fucking time. Like, I started going to the gym in college because I was so fat and such a fucking out of my mind. I'm like, I have to start going to the gym. Like, I didn't do the gym in like high school or like middle school or anything like that. That was in college. So like I got fucked up. I was a fucking mess a lot of times, but you do learn that responsible thing, and you do learn how to like balance all of it, like how to graduate while constantly getting fucked up, while constantly also having financial responsibilities. That's another thing. You have to pay dues. You have to, there's a party coming up. It's going to cost this much to get in. Like, also, like, because I was on the exec board, you learn how to kind of like not only manage people, but also how to budget for a party, how to brand it, how to talk to people about it, So it's like, it's the whole fucking 9 yards. Everything from selling tens of thousands of dollars of Xanax, like every fucking fraternity, down to learn how to fucking budget. That's I think fraternities are cool. I think
sounds awesome, man.
It's I probably did a better job of like selling people on it than it is, because there's probably some people that had horrible experiences in fraternities. I get it. Also in sororities too. Like, it's like, I get it. People are mean, people are judgmental, and it's hard, but I had a great time. I enjoyed it.
I think that's just like a people experience too. Like, that you'll get like the bad experience, and then you'll get the positive, and most people will take away what they kind of lean towards. If you're a positive person, you'll take the positive experience. If you're a negative person, you'll take the negative experience, and that's what you take away.
And also, as someone that's in the corporate world, dude, I just get along way better with the people that used to be in a fraternity, and then like they kind of settle down. Like, there are a couple people in my office now that I can tell were never in fraternities. They're fucking weird. They were just they're like very like insecure and introverted, but now they have a good position. So they kind of don't know how to like handle themselves. And they don't know how to like, they're the example of like, oh, you never learn how to get fucked up in public. Like, we go to like a steakhouse, they're having like one too many margaritas. and it's like, oh god damn it, this guy's slurring his words in public, and now the whole company looks bad with this vendor that we're bringing in. And it's like all the lessons come to fruition. So like, yeah, I get along really well that with people that used to be in fraternities in the office. And I think that's just from like learning how to like handle yourself in college in different environments.
There's also probably some sort of like kind of like some badge of honor, but like internally, I don't know if this makes sense, but like you kind of like know by just like dealing with the person that there's some bond in there, right?
Right. Yes. And it's like it's being in a fraternity is an accomplishment, so you kind of just hold on to that, and it's like something worth like holding on to and like being proud of. Like it's like like I know the idea is like these are my fraternity brothers, like that's kind of weird to like think about, but I carry that same energy now in comedy. Like my friends aren't like in comedy, it's easy to have friends. Like everybody's like friends, but there's that next level, like people that I'm like protective about and that I'm gonna like build with. Yeah. And it's something that we're like earning ourselves down the road. Like that's an energy I like tap into from my fraternity days, where I'm like, no, these are the boys. Like they're like my brothers. But yeah, that's comes from being in a fraternity where like I had to earn getting in here. Like when I interview for a job and I get a job, it feels the same where like I have to earn to get in here, you know, and it's like I'm going to protect it. It's just what
you don't
it is.
Just get that.
No, you don't just get it. You have to be someone that's worthy of like getting in. And I'll never forget like whenever you're like rushing and you have to like rush different fraternities, and then they have to call you and be like, yeah, dude, you're not going to get a bid. You know, you remember that and you're like, I need to be better, you know, like even though it's like a superficial measurement, you know, but like I like will like remember that from time to time, like, oh yeah, I wasn't good enough to like be in that, like I'll show them, you know, like just being like a little bit like just extra motivated to be better than who they thought you were at the time, you know.
There's also something fun about that.
Oh, it's so fun. Oh my God. I'm not motivated by proving people wrong, but I do enjoy the idea that down the road they will be proven wrong. Yeah. You know, like that's hilarious.
Yeah,
like,
you're proving yourself right, and at the same time you're doing that as well.
Yeah, like I'm not doing something just to prove someone wrong, but like, oh, that's hilarious that you're going to have to like eat it down the road. Like that's just... Sorry, you know, that's life. You get to make a bet on certain people. You get to believe in certain people. You get to not believe in certain people. We all get it down the road. Eventually, we're all going to be dealing with someone that we look back and like, oh, I like kind of knew that guy, and now he's like this person. That's crazy. Like, it just happens to everyone. Yeah. But I think it is cool to be able to look back and be like, oh, I'm going to prove them wrong.
When you started doing music, were you in the fraternity?
Yes. Yeah. So it was, that was like probably the origin of me doing a million things at once, where I was in the fraternity, on the exec board, getting ready to go to law school, going to class, and then also staying up till like 2 a.m. to work on music. Okay. And in my head, what I wanted to be is I wanted to go to law school to be an entertainment lawyer, like an agent, like kind of just like representing like musicians and like almost like an agent. But what I learned was that is a category of law called intellectual property law, IP law, and for some reason engineers are heavily valued in that because IP is like a lot of like tech shit. Yeah. And so I remember once I got out of school and then I took a year off and I studied for the LSAT while working at a law firm. What I basically learned was that I just like taking the LSAT because I'm really good at it. Yeah. And also I'm probably not going to get to do the law that I want to do, and I don't like working in the law firm, and I just like being adjacent to art. Okay. So yeah, I was doing music while being in school while trying to be a lawyer, and then that's just another example of like, oh, that's not what I want to be. That's not what I am at all. So that was a good learning lesson, but also like a fun little... It was fun. That was like a fun failure because I got to do the LSAT. I got to study for that while working for a law firm while like building a record label, because that was the first foray into like, okay, let me just try to build something on my own, and it like failed, but it was fun, even though I lost a lot of money.
Yeah, but you like... Yeah, it sucks that you lost the money, and especially like at that age, $15,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. It was like it was weird though, but it was because like here's what I've learned is like when I lost that money, and also like when the pandemic was first starting, I got really into flipping sports cards.
Yeah.
And I did extremely well with like to a point where like it like bumped me up a tax bracket.
Okay.
I did like very well. I remember when I had cashed out all of that, I'd like basically finished. I had a number in my bank account that I didn't imagine I'd ever have at that age.
Yeah.
My emotions then and my emotions when I lost 15 grand were almost the same, and I actually felt better when I lost the money because I was like, well, at least I'm like pushing towards something. Like flipping sports cards was just a thing I was doing purely for money.
Yeah.
And it felt very empty. And I was like, I need to get back to doing like what I really like enjoy doing, you know? So I've made a lot of money. I've lost a lot of money. And the money means nothing. The money is like, it's just a side part of like knowing what you want to do and what it feels like to not be doing what you want to do.
And even like even if it failed, air quotes, like you learned so much while doing it.
And there's so many lessons that like this is where it's like I kind of am starting to keep to myself, but there's a lot of times where I hear people working on something, trying to build something, and I'm like, it's not gonna work. And man, I'm like, you're just gonna fucking fit. And it's not, and it has nothing to do with who they are.
Yeah,
it has to do with
what they're doing
and how they're perceiving human beings to be. Like, that's a lot of what you have to learn is the true nature of human beings and what gets them to gravitate towards a certain thing, what gets them to stick around, how to create momentum. It's like, that's not going to work. You're not. And a lot of it, too, also with, like, the joke writing, it's like you're not getting how people, like, perceive you. You're not understanding people.
Yeah.
But you'll figure it out. You know, like, just you really need to figure it out yourself because if someone had told me the lessons, I wouldn't have felt it. You know, like it's the difference between telling someone that the stovetop is hot and you just touch it and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You will never touch the stovetop if you touch it when it was hot. You might touch it when someone tells you it's hot. You'd be like, well, what does that mean? And then you touch it and you're like, I'm never touching that again. You know?
Yeah. What was sketch the thing that brought you to like, did it drive you into stand-up or did you always have like a feeling for it?
I've always been here, like I've always been funny. Like I've always been like in my house in college was people coming over getting high and I'd just be crushing on the couch. That's how it always was. But sketching. So when I would go up to visit my cousin during those summers when I was in Texas, we would be doing short films. Yeah. So it was always a constant like it's always been a cycle where you kind of find yourself back to like where you were like years ago. So sketches were the first thing when I was doing the record label. I was like, I want something a little bit more I like this art. I like that I'm doing art. I want to do something for myself a little bit more. And I gravitated towards sketches because I'm like, I remember doing short film. And then when I was like, I kind of want to do stand-up, it was like one of those things where it's like it always been on my mind. Yeah. And then I was like, maybe I should do stand-up because I was enjoying writing sketches. Yeah. And I was like, let me just try stand-up was a foray I had when I ended up here, but it's always since I've started, it's felt like a thing where I can apply all my lessons and just be the best version of myself. Yeah. It just kind of has made the most sense where it's like stand-up is 100% you have to bet on yourself. And it's like I finally have like the skills and I am the person that I want to bet on. Yeah. A lot of times what people have to admit is they're not quite the person that they should be betting on. Some people need to be a better version of themselves to bet on themselves. But it's a slow process. It's like, it's a very slow process. There's a lot of things that I did before stand-up that I feel like people still do while they're in stand-up. It's just growth. It's just working on yourself off stage. So in a way, it's like, I've been working on myself and I've been learning, but stand-up was just this new thing that I like wandered into, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this can be the thing that makes the most sense. Yeah. While also still doing the comedy adjacent stuff like the sketches and stuff. So, yeah, just art. I've always been around it. I've always like gravitated towards it, and I'm very equally business and art driven, but I'm much more fascinated by art. I'm capable in both areas, and it's helped me a lot, and it will continue to help me. But what I want to focus on is art. Is
there one that you're particularly driven towards more, or?
I mean, between comedy and business,
like the whole gamut. Like for example, in comedy, like sketch or.
I think eventually, I like stand up is the thing that I want to do for like a very long time. That's just what I've like enjoyed the most. my goal would be to quietly retire and then only do stand up.
Yeah.
And I say quietly because when people know that you have money, they don't think you're funny anymore.
Yeah.
It's just a it's just a
Yeah, yeah.
psychological thing, right? Yeah, I love comedy. I love comedy by far the most, but I am good at business and I'm good at investing. I'm good with money, which is a good thing to have in comedy because a
Yeah.
lot of people, it's like they're fucking struggling all the time. And like for me, it's like I can invest in sketches and my setup
Mhm.
and how I want to be growing in comedy with money
Yeah.
in a way that a lot of other people can't.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I do want to be doing stand up for a long time. I will be, but it's what I like the most. I'll let the other stuff fail.
And I think stand up is the one that's the more sustainable one because you can do it by yourself.
Yes.
The other ones, they're to me they're very fun, but like I did improv for a while
Nice.
and I did it for about a year and a half. I'm a guy that needs reps
Right.
for me to be good.
Right.
And if you do improv once or twice a week, that's okay. But I was seeing how I wasn't growing the way I always have like these expectations of
Right.
myself and then the way where I'm at.
Right.
And also the other part is like you need other people. Like you can kind of do improv on stage by
Right.
yourself, but it's
weird. It's like a monologue thing. It's
Yeah.
very weird. Yeah.
So just needing those other people to me was like, oh, yeah, especially if they like you said earlier, if they don't have the same goals as you do,
Right.
then you're just going to be either dragging them along with you or you're just going to be very frustrated.
Right.
all the
And you're
time.
also probably not having fun.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, it's I like comedy a lot because it is just you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just your own world and you're building towards it. Sketches are great because it like kind of puts my management skills to
Mhm.
like the test. I
Yeah.
graduated with a management major.
Yeah.
And I like managing people because I feel like it's really important to keep people motivated because you ultimately, in order to keep people motivated, you have to understand how they are at their core and what
Yeah.
like makes them happy. So like I enjoy managing a group, you know, like even like this movie that I'm writing with Alex and Avery.
Mhm.
That's like management skills too because
Yeah.
you have to set a weekly meeting, you have to see how people are feeling. Sometimes we don't want to write for more than like an hour or so, and then you're like, okay,
Mm.
that's fine. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
But also you have to like set goals to make sure you're always progressing, right? And sketches
Mhm.
are a whole nother thing too because you gotta set up the shoot for the day of, make sure
Yeah.
everything's set in place. Sometimes people will be more motivated by having a little bit more responsibility on certain sketches where it's like, okay, you can direct this one, you got it, like do it, fuck it, or you want to act in this one, like that's fine.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of I like the sketches and the management side of things, but it's not like the thing that I want to do the longest. What I want to do the longest is bet on myself, and that's comedy.
Yeah.
That's comedy more than anything, really.
Yeah. I think that's from knowing you. I haven't seen any of your sketches. I haven't
No
seen
one's seen
any
any of my sketches.
So,
Yeah, it's just I
but-
shoot them and I put them to the side.
But just from what I've seen from stand up, I think that's where you should do your betting.
Right.
Cuz like you're just a year and a half in or something.
It'll be 2 years in next month.
The way you write already is very distinguished than someone that normally does that for 2 years,
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
so
Dude. Thank you.
That's very impressive by how you accrued that, and you did that through like piecing
Everything
together.
else. Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's 2 years of straight comedy coming up, but it's been a lifetime of just trying shit. That's all it is. I can always kind of tell when someone tries. A lot of people think that when you start comedy, you progress very quickly. I've already seen it a lot of times. They think they have this thing about them. All it is, they've struggled.
Yeah.
They pull from things, and a lot of times the people that progress, they don't realize that that's what they're doing, but they're pulling from their life experience
Yeah.
and their failures, and because they've kind of been here before, regardless of whether or not they recognize it.
Yeah.
Where a lot of times that's the danger of getting into comedy too early, is you haven't really lived,
Yeah.
and so you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna do comedy, and then the mics don't go well, or maybe you start hot and then the bookings dry up and you think you've failed, when in reality you never
Yeah.
really succeeded to start with. You're just
Yeah.
kind of growing. That's just the process of how it is. So yeah, I think it's just failure. It's all it's been is just a lifelong of like failure and lessons and just keep moving on. That's all it is.
That's I think that's a great place to end it on.
Yeah.
What is there anything you want to plug or anything like that?
No, I mean just my Instagram at it's Tabet. I have goals to start posting a lot more in 2024, so there'll hopefully be stuff there. But yeah, just the Instagram for now. We'll see. I'll tell people maybe next time I'll have a lot more to talk about, but this time it's just what's happened, not what is happening. You know?
Yeah.
So it's very looking back and just plug in the Instagram.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, dude, appreciate you.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Boo! Be-de-boo. Ba-ba-de-ba-boo. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.